And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. My name's Arthur. Thank you for joining me as we turn to the last portion of Genesis chapter 2. And we come upon a very important foundational principle in life. I guess the most foundational principle is that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. But the second foundational principle is that it is not good for man to be alone. But God's plan and purpose is that a man and a woman should come together in a lifelong union which we call marriage. And God recognized that this is the pattern at the very beginning when he brought Eve to Adam. Well, let's read the background of this and the consequences of this in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So Adam gave names to all cattle, to the birds of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." And may the Lord bless these words to us. As God has brought Adam into the scene, he says a single man by himself, it's not the best way for him. It's not good that man should be alone. Man was designed to have fellowship. This was the whole idea that God has in creation, that God should not be God alone, but that God would have creatures made in his own image with which he could have fellowship. And that is why God has great love for men, that he wants men to be in fellowship with him. And the whole story of the Bible is the story of God wanting fellowship. Well, the man that he has made also needs fellowship, needs a partner, and needs to have a partner in which there is complete reliance and trust and cooperation. And so this was the purpose that God had. Now, God was very wise in the way that he presented this woman to this man. He didn't create a new being alongside Adam so that there should be rivalry between the two. Satan has come along and caused rivalry between men, saying women can do a job as good as men, and so men are no longer needed. But God's purpose is that there should not be rivalry, there should be cooperation, there should be the synergy of the two cooperating together should be much greater than one by himself. First of all, we're told, though, that God brought the animals to Adam. So as he woke up, he saw the trees in the garden. But then the Lord God, as he formed the beasts of the field, brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. Adam gave names. This must have been extremely exciting for God to see with Adam, with his newly acquired voice, what he would call the various creatures. So God accepted the names that Adam gave to the various animals. And men are still in the process of giving names to things and identifying things by names and unique names. so that we can be precise in our identification. But with all the animals and all the fellowship that Adam could have with the animals, for there was no enmity or bitterness or fear in the animals at that stage. They were all part of God's wonderful creation, and God brought them to Adam, and Adam named them. He was not under threat from the lions or the elephants or whatever that God brought to him. Adam gave them names, but really Adam couldn't communicate with them at the level which Adam needed. They could cooperate, but they couldn't communicate at the level that would satisfy Adam. So God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he took a rib, which he fashioned into a woman. Now, the most fascinating thing is that now that we have come to understand genetics, we find that the genetics of a woman are the same as a man, except that a man has an X and a Y chromosome, and the woman has 2 X chromosomes. So that everything that is in a woman is contained in a man, but there is that little bit more which makes the difference. And so there is no competition between the man and the woman. They are one flesh. And Adam recognises this. He is a person like me, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Adam understands how woman was formed. Then we have the most profound statement. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. It's an intriguing thing. Nakedness before a spouse is completely different to nakedness before someone who is not a spouse. For God's purpose is that there should be complete intimacy between the man and his wife. As Paul says in 1 Corinthians, the man's body belongs to the wife, and the wife's body belongs to the man. They are one flesh. But after sin entered the world, then men needed to wear clothes. There was shame in nakedness. Men needed to protect themselves from the environment in which they lived. Jesus picked up on these words when challenged about marriage, about divorce, and quoted these words of Moses as from the beginning. Divorce was not part of God's plan from the beginning. It's a concession that God allowed because of the wickedness of men, because sin came into the scene. But his plan was that a man should leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And the Bible celebrates the union of a man and a woman. The wedding is taken as a picture of Christ joining together with his church. And the Bible has much to say on the role of men and the role of women, and in marriage, and the responsibility of a home for a child. For the family is the fundamental unit of society. Afterwards, God has divided the people of the world into nations, into peoples and tongues. But the ultimate unit is the family. The family comes from before the fall, before the flood. Before all things, it is the most fundamental unit of society. God invented the family because it was not good for man to be alone. And so a couple who are married together and cooperating together become a very powerful unit and are able to achieve a lot under the headship of God. For any family needs also to have God in the fellowship.